Happy New Year!
Woo! Oh my God, we're so cheesy.
Hi everyone. Welcome to Hot Pot Talks. My name is David Ng, and this is my dear friend and collaborator, Jen Sunshine. We are beaming this live stream to you from the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. You might know us as the co-founders and artistic directors of Love Intersections, which is a media arts collective that produces documentary film about queer BIPOCs. We're also members of the Vancouver Artists Labor Union Cooperative, a VALU COOP. And we're really excited for some of our VALU COOP colleagues to join us today on this Hot Pot Talks. For those of us who are joining us for the very first time and who might be new to, who have never heard of Love Intersections, part of our philosophy with Love Intersections is to use art and dialogue with our community about identity, culture, and our visions about social change. And so we came up with this idea of Hot Pot Talks to invite people from community and really people that we admire and really wanted to have conversations with to talk to us. And I thought, Jen, I also wanted to mention, we were also inspired by Red Table Talks. I wanted to give Red Table Talks a shout out to Jada. For those who don't know, that's a show of a similar style that the Smith family, so Jada Pinkett Smith, Willow Smith, and Grammy, they have these really frank conversations around a table, and so we were also really inspired by that.
It's not similar at all. It's very loosely based.
Loosely inspired.
As you know by now, this is a weekly series live streaming to YouTube and Facebook every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time, where we have free-flowing conversations with artists, our activists, chefs, performers, poets, and community organizers about what it means to be an artist facing today's realities. What ethical responsibilities do we have as artists? What organizing and art making looks like during quarantine, all the while sharing our favorite hot pot ingredients.
Yeah, so why Hot Pot Talks? So this, as I mentioned, the idea behind Hot Pot Talks was thinking about the metaphor of the hot pot. And this idea of connecting community with warmth and nourishment, thinking about themes of nourishment, Chinatown as nourishment, the ceremony of hot pot, so like the communal nature, many different types of hot pot. So in Asia, there's many different types of hot pot, but there's also many different types of hot pot all around the world. Like fondue, for example, is another style of hot pot. Thinking about themes of comfort food, what is comfort food? Why does certain food bring us certain senses, stimulate certain senses and nostalgias, and thinking about the different varieties of food and textures that are on the table, and thinking about textures as a metaphor for community dialogue. And so thinking about these themes of nourishment and love, we are very excited to announce today they are finally ready for sale. Our limited edition tote bags, Have You Eaten Today? And I'm just gonna read a description, Jen, that you put together because I think it just was so beautiful. Have you eaten today simply means I love you in BIPOC language. A simple question asked by so many of our parents, elders, and aunties everywhere, evoking a shared familial understanding of love and tenderness. These feelings of unspoken care inspired Hot Pot Talks, where culture and community nourish our bodies and our hearts too. So they're for sale on our VALU COOP site. Proceeds go towards our Engaging Chinatown project, which is a collaboration we're doing with the Limb Association. And our friends Jessica and Cameron are dropping the links in the comments, so you can head over to our site and purchase this there.
We're pretty shameless.
A little shameless self-promo, that doesn't hurt anyone.
It's very true. I'm a little embarrassed, but why don't we move on to acknowledgements? We want to acknowledge our practicum students who are working tirelessly in the back end, who are helping out. Just a shout out to Cameron, Lamia, Ava, Yeska, and Victoria. So David, do you want
to one quick thing.
Yeah.
We're going to try to do this, but if you comment wherever you're viewing the stream right now, if you comment, we can see the comments. And so if we can, we'll try to respond. We have quite a few guests today, so it might be harder. But yeah, please interact with us. We love seeing your questions, your support. Yeah.
Subscribe to us on YouTube.
Yes. So without further ado, we have, I'd like to invite our three amazing guests, Annie Canto, Amanda Huynh, and Nura Ali. Hey guys.
Hi.
Can I just also say, first of all, this is so amazing that, I mean, we're beaming from almost all different locations. So Annie, myself, and Jen are in Vancouver. Nura, you're in Calgary. And Amanda, you're in New York, right?
I'm in Brooklyn, yeah.
Amazing. So why don't, I mean, I think we all start with the same, we start every Hot Pot Talks with the same question. Maybe if each of you could introduce yourself and share what your favorite hot pot ingredient is. Maybe we'll start with, I'm gonna start with Annie.
Sure, yeah. Hi, everybody. I don't know how much information to give. I guess we'll find out a lot about me later. But yeah, my name's Annie. I know everybody. I like everybody in here. I know them well. Let's see. I'm also part of the Vancouver Artist Labor Union Cooperative. So that's a really awesome project to be involved with these people. And yeah, I don't know. I'm a community-based artist. I also do a lot of comics lately because I don't know how to do community work right now. And yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation and like for everyone to hear our origin stories with each other.
Cool.
My favorite. Oh.
Go ahead. No, sorry, I cut you off.
My favorite hot pot ingredient. Okay, so my most favorite hot pot ingredient is gailan because I like to eat as many like leaves as possible when they absorb all the soup. But also, I really love those. I don't know what they're called, but they're just like fried dough. It's like the only soup that I know of where you just are putting fried dough into the soup base and getting it soggy and then eating it. It's like the oddest. I love it.
Amazing. Amanda?
Yeah, I'm just like, I don't know, I'm so focused on hot pot because I don't know if you could tell, like right here, there's steam because I am actually having a hot pot for one during this conversation.
Amazing.
But yeah, I've been trying to practice defining myself first by the things that are not my vocation. So I'm a daughter and a sister and a bestie, a regular friend, a work friend, a partner. What else am I? And I'm an assistant professor of industrial design at Pratt Institute here in Brooklyn in Lenape. My favorite hot pot ingredient is tong po in Cantonese, and I think just chrysanthemum greens in English. They're the best. I don't have them today because I couldn't get to Chinatown, but I also really like daikon because you leave them in there the whole time and then they just absorb all the flavor.
So good.
Amazing. Nura?
Hi. It's so hard to follow those introductions. I suppose I'm Nura. I am a visual artist and community organizer living in Calgary right now. And I think that I'm trying to figure out, like Amanda, what actually defines me aside from the job that I do. So I am a person who can hold their breath a really long time. I'm really good at snowball fights. And my favorite hot pot ingredient is definitely mushrooms. I just feel like they're little flavor pillows.
Amazing. And I'm curious, how did the three of you meet?
A lot of different ways.
Yeah, it was like Annie and I first, and I feel like you should tell that story because that's a very hilarious and very awesome story.
You want me to tell it?
Well, you can tell it or I can tell it. Should I tell it?
You tell it because I think it's funny. I think it's funnier from your perspective.
So Annie and I met one day very, very randomly. I was in the studio and I had a plaster mold that was just about to set. So I had an hour to kill and I was just walking around. And then I walked past this girl who's sitting at a table that's fully set, like dinnerware and everything. And the sign alongside it said, "Will you have lunch with me?" And I was like about to buy lunch and I was like, you know what? I will. And so I sat down and it turns out that Annie had been all week making lunch for two and just sitting and asking strangers to come have lunch with her. So it's a very cute meat. It's a very cute meat.
That's
Yeah.
And Annie, why were you doing that? What was the project?
David, why were you doing that?
David, I'm an artist, so.
Well, that's why. I
Why?
need to know.
Well, it was a project. I don't know. I was in we were in school, so you know, we were trying all different kinds of stuff. I was doing a project. It was called Share My Lunch. So just like Nura said, I had this cart that I made, and I had like a foldable 2-top table and like 2 chairs that I would like wheel around the school, and then I would like pack lunch for 2 people and put it in like a hot bag, and then cart it around, and then choose a place and be like, okay, this is where I'm gonna have lunch today. Wait for someone to come have lunch with me. Honestly, it was super fun, but it was mostly a failure. Besides the fact that I met Nura, I didn't know why I was doing it at all. But then I met Nura. Like Nura was maybe one of the last people I met. I was like, oh, that's why I did this project. It's because then Nura and I actually ended up like collaborating on almost the rest of our degrees while we were in school. Basically, yeah, the whole thing. So
Amazing.
Yeah.
So it was meant to be. It's fated, clearly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that kind of leads into how I met Annie as well. I was already teaching at Emily Carr University at the time. And Annie, did you write me? I think she wrote me an email to say, hey, who sent you to me, Annie?
I have no idea.
Okay, yeah, somebody sent Annie to me. She's like, hey, I hear you do food design stuff. I'm thinking of creating a gallery in a refrigerator. Can we meet?
Yeah,
I love the fridge gallery. That was so special.
Just for context, that's another project. I think Nora and I collaborated on that project quite a lot, but it was this idea where I couldn't figure out, I'm sure all of us in this room actually have had the same problem. I could not figure out the gallery space at all. I still can't figure it out, and I don't know what to do in there. So I was like, oh, you know what I like though, is I like looking at food. So I found like a fridge on Craigslist and carted that into the school and was like, this is my new gallery. And then we carted the fridge around. It had wheels, and Nora and I would do workshops with people where we were making sculptures out of food in random spaces. Yeah.
You should also mention the fact that you built a gallery room inside the fridge too.
That's true. That's true as well.
It actually looks like a gallery.
Yeah, it wasn't just a regular fridge. Okay, it was a gallery.
Okay, Amanda, I'm dying to know, because you didn't finish your, when you received that email from Annie, like what did you say? What were your thoughts?
Oh, I mean, I was like, I'm on board. Who is this lady? I was just like, at my earliest convenience, went to her studio, and we just chatted about the fridge and food, and fell in love. And yeah, now we're in a long distance loving relationship.
This is a beautiful triangle. I love it.
But also, Amanda and I hadn't met until Annie and I were doing a project this summer. And so that was our first time getting to know each other, and that was extra special too. It was essentially the same idea as what we're doing right now, where we just collect people that we really admire, people that we want to spend more time with, and then do these informal conversations, knowing that those are the places that we actually learn the most.
Totally. And can I ask the obvious question? Why was the reason? Why was food the vehicle for the different projects that you guys were a part of?
Interesting question.
Yeah.
Like, how much time do we have again?
Yeah. I feel like that's all we have to think about. Okay.
Go for it.
I don't know. We probably all have different answers, but for me, at the time, I couldn't figure out what I was doing. I couldn't figure out what I'd like to do as an artist, and I was like, what's the constant in my life is cooking for people. And then I don't know, when I heard about people like Amanda, I was like, oh, you can do that. You can do that as like the thing that you're qualified to do, and you don't have to be a chef, and you don't have to own a restaurant. You can just think about it a lot. So I don't know. Food was a really important thing for me at that time, and always to just like figure out who my community was and invite them in a welcoming way. I don't know.
Yeah,
amazing.
I definitely agree with that. I feel like for me, it was also that there's something that happens at our school, and it's it can be such a lonely place, and it could be such a place where you feel in all kinds of different ways alone. And for me, and I think that's true for Annie too, that we had both come to Vancouver at the same time. We were both new to this place. We didn't have, years of extended friendships with people. And so for me, food was also about community building and about making friends and about, forging those friendships over steaming something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Amanda?
I think like maybe a version of a short answer to that is that I really get to talk about everything that I love to talk about and everything that I care about if I talk about food first. So it's been the way that I've gotten to meet a lot of people. I do have some kind of qualification to talk about food. I have a master's in food design. So that I think has opened a lot of doors for me and opened a lot of tables for me. So.
Can you tell us a little bit about that degree?
Yeah, that was my question too.
so
I'm
curious.
so fascinated. I love
Yeah.
it. I'm a huge, and maybe also tell us about edible projects. I'm a huge fan of what you guys are doing with that project too.
Thank you. Yeah, so my degree is actually, I have a bit different background, I would say, from a design perspective. So I'm trained as an industrial designer and then really started to see food as a material. So that's why I pursued this degree. Food design encompasses everything that touches food. So all of this stuff in front of me, like bowls, utensils, that is all food design, as well as the shape of the food itself. These are very special dumplings that are no longer being made in Chinatown. The shop has closed, so these were like relics in my freezer that I thought it would be a good occasion to eat them. And yeah, the spaces of food as well. So for me, it connected just a lot of things. And when I came back to Vancouver, I'm not in Vancouver anymore, but when I arrived back to Vancouver, I joined up with my friend Mandy Chang, who was also a trained industrial designer, who was away in Paris studying patisserie, and decided to both just do these small scale projects in food and design, and just off the side of our desks. So that's what Edible Projects was, and it really became a way for us to together put out small projects into the world, food projects, and meet a lot of people, especially in Vancouver's Chinatown.
Very cool. I'm thinking of our last guest, Tao Lee Goff. She's a PhD, and when we were chatting with her, she was talking about she's doing this work that she's calling gastropoetics. And she was talking about like the syllabus and as a mixtape as a recipe, and these sorts of like themes of cultivating or curating something together to nourish. And I was thinking, I was looking at your project, Amanda, that I think you did at Pratt, the Designing for Nourishment of People and Communities, which really resonated along sort of the themes that Tao was talking about, and also sort of the things that we're thinking about through Hot Pot Talks. Can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Yeah, I can. I mean, it's actually not a project. It's an entire class. It's a capstone class. So it's the students' undergraduate thesis class. And it have a theme of nourishment and social change. And it was something that I proposed to the program of industrial design to say, like, I think that there's room for this. And I called it nourishment and social change because for me, the students didn't necessarily have to work with food. So I wanted to say nourishment, nourishment and nourishing yourselves and each other, but also like our communities. And it doesn't maybe directly come through food, but I can support those kinds of social projects. So we had projects about voting, about the politics of break time, about protest through food. And it just became, because that was like in the middle of that semester is when we went into lockdown. And it was really beautiful to see that the projects that they were really already passionate about just became so much more important because of COVID. And I didn't see that particularly as strongly in other projects that maybe weren't as pressing. So it was a lovely group.
Can you share some insight from your students in terms of how the pandemic and being on lockdown has impacted their own, their class, like your class?
Yeah, I'm running that class again right now. Kai was one of my students in the class. Running the class again. And, one of the things that we did before lockdown was actually each Monday, they agreed to come early and take turns cooking breakfast for one another. Wow. And that created, in 7 or 8 weeks before we went into lockdown, created such a community. And this happens in every class that I have the privilege of teaching that has to do with food, is the students become really close because we break bread together all the time. And so, yeah, I think they start to see all the pieces come together, as I have, that your life and your work can actually be connected in these really meaningful ways. And it's not that we just have these objects that we create in a vacuum, or gallery shows that we create in a vacuum, but it's actually all related to who we are and what nourishes our bodies.
I love that. It reminds me, Jen and Annie, and about the picnic that we did at VALU COOP, and the act of putting those packages together and sharing food with the community. Annie and Nura, I want to turn this question to you guys, because one of the reasons why we wanted to invite the both of you to for this talk was because you guys had done a similar project, and you mentioned, Annie, that you and Nura worked on several projects together. Can you tell us about some of those projects that were along these same themes that we were discussing?
Sure. Yeah. Which one do you think we should start with, Nura? I guess the first one that comes to mind is probably the Center for Polite Dissent, which is like our final project that we did live together. But then we have a really interesting project we did this summer that Nura mentioned. It's called Pool. So maybe we can talk about both. Yeah, I guess I'll talk about the center and you can talk about Pool. Yeah. So
you're also allowed to interrupt each other, just saying.
Anyway, not
no, have to be polite around here.
So Nora and I had already been collaborating for like a year and a half, I think, and we came up with this project called the Center for Polite Dissent, which was sort of like it started out as like a theoretical place where you could interrupt a place specifically in like a higher education situation where like students of color aren't being heard, aren't being invited, or aren't being seen just because of the curriculum, because of like the white walls of the institution kind of thing. So we're thinking a lot about how students, like how they express being left out is like through acts of dissent, quiet acts of dissent, like funny acts of dissent, back talking, like snarky comments, all these things that you do when you're a student because you're just trying to express some frustration, express that you also have some power, even when you're being left out. So yeah, at the center, it like developed from there where we made zines. It turned into like a publishing house. We actually like set up a space in the library of the school and started doing potlucks every Friday. So we would invite students of color to come so we could all just meet each other and understand that we're all there. And yeah, it was a really fun project.
The library, how we did a new syllabus.
Yeah. You want to talk about that?
Sure. Because we were essentially trying to figure out ways that we could shift our focus away from trying to interact with the institution in a sincere way. We found that a lot of the times that we were trying to make institutional change happen, we were going into those spaces in a very sincere way, and then the pushback that we were receiving and the general feeling that we would always have was that was just a waste of our time. Like, why did we do all this time, like research and effort and things to make this happen when the people in the room are not having the same conversation that we were? And so we did a very like sudden pivot where we realized that actually for us the things that matter are the people that are at the receiving end of all of these institutional racism and all these kinds of things. So we shifted our focus to the students and decided to figure out ways that we can help them through their time at MFR. And so the center was a response in many ways to all the things that we felt were lacking for us as students. And in the student solidarity potlucks was definitely one of the most amazing places because we'd get together every Friday and we would share food and we would share stories. And it was the kind of space that you can come into and no one is going to ask you, are you sure? When you tell them of a experience that you've had, everyone's going to be like, oh, that was weird. And we also realized that for us, it was a really heavy burden to have a complete absence of BIPOC people from our syllabuses. So instead of like campaigning for curriculum change, which we did do, we decided instead to just provide that syllabus for the students. So I physically went and walked the stacks of the library and collected every single book that I could find about any BIPOC artist ever. And then, worked with the library to buy a whole bunch of new books, and then we just had that available. So anybody could walk into that space and access that.
And now, Nura, you're in Calgary now. I'm curious about, because I see this like direct, like where you're directly translating your experience for this project, and now you're the one who is teaching like grades 4, 5s, or like you're creating the program or syllabus for them. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, these ones they're a little bit older, so they're between the ages of 8 and 11.
Okay.
And it's definitely a continuation of trying to figure out who my focus is and who I feel like I can have the most impact when I have a sincere conversation. I feel like for me, that's definitely been one of the biggest pivots for me, is to figure out ways that I can surround myself with sincere people and have sincere conversations. And I just spent 8 hours today teaching, and it was utterly glorious. Like, it was so amazing. So I did a presentation for them and was talking about some really heavy things. So we were like defining racism versus personal prejudice. We were talking about discrimination. We were talking about white privilege. All these terms that seem like they might be too heavy for someone that age to understand. And so I had like my presentation that I did, and then we had a 45-minute question period at the end where the students could ask me any questions that they had on their minds, or they could ask general questions that they had. And the questions that came up were just amazing, like so incredible. And I could see their little wheels turning in their head. So I'm like, oh, I'm getting them. And I definitely spend a lot of that time trying to figure out ways to not only present the difficulties that are in our world, to not dumb it down for them, to try to actually talk to them as though they understand, expecting that they would understand, but also give them a way out of that. So a lot of the time in the presentation, I was trying to give them examples of like other children who are becoming activists and doing incredible, amazing, like stupendous things, and showing them that this isn't something that you have to wait until you grow up to do. Because essentially, you guys are the kids, you guys are the leaders of the future and the inheritors of the world that we've created. So I felt very good after that.
Yeah, I keep going back and forth on this because I spent a good decade working with youth and doing kind of youth activism work specifically, and every year I say I'm just super impressed by Gen Z. Obviously, the cohort that you work with, they're 8-year-olds, so they're like alpha generation, I guess. And then I go back and forth. I'm like, yes, but then I'm also really frustrated when elders or older people would say, well, let's just let the kids change the world, like they're the future, right? But I'm like, us elders have lived through, all the civil rights, women's rights, all the rights and all the movements, and you learn nothing from that, and and so I go back and forth on it, and I'm not trying to create a generational war, as if
I definitely struggle and think about the same things too. But I feel like in times like that, I try to remind myself that the difference between sort of like how to quantify the change that we've made, because I feel like for me there's definitely a lot of pressure to do like very splashy changes, like if you organize a protest and 100,000 people came, or if you did a workshop and there was like a huge turnout, or all of these like metrics that we use to judge success, I think are actually fundamentally flawed. And so the way that I think about it is that if I even found one person who I was able to change their mind, and then not only change their minds, but give them enough excitement and passion and, you know, enthusiasm to then take that on to go make further change, that to me, that feels much more worthwhile. And, you know, so I feel like there are things that we are doing in this generation too that are going to have long-lasting change. You know, that's not going to be like a very splashy change, but it's one of those subtle, you know.
Yeah, well, and I think about like, you know, the theme of like thinking about impact and also shifting values too. You know, we've been talking about sort of how art forms such as sort of this community cultivation work of sharing food often doesn't get seen as an art or cultural practice. And I shared this story, and I think I shared the story in the first Hot Pot Talks. But like I think about like my aunties. Oh, and I was gonna share this. I totally forgot because it's Lunar New Year, and I found this in my closet. My aunties. We talked about aunties a lot in our last episode because Claire Yao founded United Aunties, and they actually made this lantern out of red envelopes. Oops, and it's falling apart. But it's really beautiful. And I shared the story of, you know, my aunties in my dad's side of the family are holders of the traditional medicine knowledge in my family. And so they used to make soups, literally deliver them to my house every week, depending on the season, depending on, you know, your whatever ailments or whatever your body might be going through. And, you know, and I think about how important that role was in my family and in my community. But oftentimes that doesn't get seen as an art form. You know, certain types of art forms get valued in certain ways, and certain other important, vital cultural work gets looked at a different way too. And so I think about, you know, your question, Nura, of what is the big changes that we want to see. And yeah, and I agree with you know, like the big splashy protests are one way of making our voices heard, but also shifting the values of how different cultural practices are meaningful and hold communities together, which is something I think across all of our practices, which is why I was so excited to talk to all of you today.
Yeah, that's definitely, yeah. But I was gonna say, Annie is probably somebody who talked a lot to how community-oriented and food-centric practices are viewed in institutions.
Yeah. Do you want me to talk about that?
Throw you under the bus, but yeah.
Well, I don't know.
It's Amanda, I'm sure.
Yeah, probably. I don't know. I think it's I'll sum it up to something that's really short. Whereas, like, I feel like you have to do some tricks. You have to be subversive, because like you have to like learn all these long phrases like social practice, socially engaged art, so that people like consider it art to just serve people soup in the hallway.
Relational aesthetics, you know?
Relational aesthetics. You have to learn the whole history so that you can like have the right to feed another person when you're in the institution. It's very strange.
Let alone that covert language.
I know, but I do want to mention, because I said it, the phrase, another way that we're all connected, Amanda, Nura, and I, is that Nura and I, without knowing it was connected to Amanda, adopted this little club at the school we went to called Social Practice Kitchen. And Amanda, I think it was like your students, or you were mentoring one of the people who created this cart in the first place. But it was a cart that we would wheel around the school that was really well designed, and it had induction burners, and you could plug it in anywhere. And you would just bring enough ingredients to serve like as many students as possible. And like we'd have these big lineups of students just coming by to like grab a meal between classes. And one of the events we did was called Eat Hot Pot. And yeah, it was wild. We had it was so weird. I totally forgot until today, because I was trying to find the poster that we made for that event so I could put it up behind me, but I don't know where it is. Anyway, it's so funny though. I have videos on my phone too of like the line for that particular event, because everyone loves hot pot, like wrapped around the entire cafeteria. And I have a video of someone who's like playing the violin for people while people waited in line. So yeah, anyway, that's another way that we're connected. And again, like that project was supported through the institution, I guess, because it was a club. They had to name it as a club, and then it was an industrial design project making the cart, so they named it that. When really just the goal is just to serve free food to people by whatever means possible.
Yeah. That was a project by Joey Chung, a student who actually was in my very first class that I taught at Emily Carr, my very first food design class. So Joey, I hope is on the call today, but Joey has like remained a friend all this time. And it was her undergraduate thesis project to build that beautiful kitchen, the mobile kitchen project. And then she donated it to the Students' Union at Emily Carr, which is why it's continued this life.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm dying to know because I think Sue-Ann really wanted to know what Amanda was cooking. So I think we need to see what you're
I'm literally just having a one-person hot pot. It's like, I'll show you like the size of the pot. This is
oh, that's so cute.
And I've got these dumplings from 88 Lanzhou. Like I said, it's closed now in New York's Chinatown, but some pork and cabbage dumplings, some like enoki and bok choy and daikon. And then it's in a mushroom broth, like a mushroom base.
Thank you. So I don't mean to break the fourth wall, since Nura and Annie are also the co-hosts. David and I have been co-hosts long enough. You two feel free to ask questions to Amanda. So please do take.
I have one quick question though. Amanda, you're also drinking something that looks really familiar.
Yes,
always
a hot pot drink.
Yes, it is the hot pot drink.
Oh my God.
And it helps with digestion, right?
It helps with the heat. So I think I don't know. It's just a sweet herbal drink, but it's supposed to help with the heatiness of hot pot. So, you know, like with Chinese medicine and food, you're always wanting to be balanced. So another cold, cooling thing that you could be drinking during hot pot is beer.
I was always told that you're not supposed to mix the hot and cold, but that is also just my family, because my mom, I still hear her voice to this day if I drink a cold drink while eating dinner or eating anything hot. She says that's like not good for the qi. So I get very confused by the rules of traditional Chinese medicine.
I had a follow-up question. What would you drink instead?
You're not supposed to drink anything. You're supposed to let it all digest, and then you wait half an hour, and then you drink water. But you're like not supposed to mix it up. I don't know. My family is also very weird and weird. I like that.
The memes about Yipei, which we're talking about, is hot air.
Yes,
are hilarious though, because it's like, you know, I saw this meme once, like, you know, if you break your arm and your aunties are like, oh, you have hot air, you didn't drink enough water, you know. Everything is about your Yipei, right? It's just so funny.
Totally. Any ailment at all, they're like, no, you gotta drink some cooling tea.
That's right.
The fix-all for everything in my family was Vicks Vapor Rub.
Yeah, same with my family.
That's hilarious.
Whatever you have.
I mean,
it's always Vicks and Tiger Bomb.
Yeah, it is like Tiger Bomb.
Tiger Bomb,
yeah. That was the same in my family, and I have like strong memories of like many nights my dad like putting vapor rub inside my nose, and it says on the bottle, do not put inside your body.
Annie, can you tell us how, like, a little bit about your childhood and where you grew up and how you grew up? Siblings, family?
Yeah, sure. What a random question.
I love that random question.
Maybe I can just insert, because when we were chatting last time, we were talking about nourishment, and you shared that goat story.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I can tell the goat story. I do want to say, too, while we're getting into my family stuff, you can't see them, but I very purposely wore these egg earrings.
Incredible.
Because they're from I have a younger sister. She's 6 years younger, and she gave them to me for Christmas. This is actually the first time I've worn them. But she got them for me because we both have this like underlying obsession with thinking eggs are funny. Because this ties back to the tote bag actually that says have you eaten today, because in my family the equivalent of that phrase is you walk into the house, someone's in the kitchen, and this is something my dad would do. He'd be sitting in the kitchen, and we had like a little window you could see whoever's in there. So he's in the kitchen, and you walk in the front door, and he says, "What are you doing?" Which means like, are you hungry? And then without question, he says, I'll make you an egg. And then he would do it to anybody. Like you wouldn't have to be part of the family. And I think for my friend group, at least in high school, they were like, oh, let's go to Annie's house. We get 3 eggs. So yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I grew up in so my dad's from the Philippines and came over immigrated to the United States and lived in Queens for a while in the 70s and 80s. So that's cool. My mom is from Western Washington. And so I grew up in Eastern Washington after their whole wild trip around the States trying to figure out where my dad could live and have a job and where my mom, they had, interracial families. There's all that kind of history. I won't get into it. But anyway, I grew up in Eastern Washington in this really small town where I was really lucky to have a small community of Filipina women. There's the culture of white veterans coming back over from the wars and bringing Filipino culture back over with their wives and families. And we had this club called the Sampaguita Club in my hometown where it was this little tiny pocket in the middle of white Eastern Washington where we'd have Filipino parties. And I guess anybody, any island nation would come to these parties. So Filipinos, we had some Tongan people come. It was really nice. Something that I take for granted a lot. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know. I think the goat story, right?
The goat story.
So that's why I'm talking about the Sampaguita Club, because my mom is actually a white person, but she actually holds a lot of the recipes from the Filipino side of my family, because in order to be welcomed into my family, she had to go into cooking training with my dad's sister for a week before they got married, and she learned how to cook everything. So anyway, she what's the story? So my dad is a physician in this small town, and again, it's really small, so everybody knows him. And one of his patients has raised not 1 but 2 goats to give to my father as gifts. I don't know. So anyway, the first goat was nothing special. My mom didn't know what to do with it, and she honestly forgot about it because it was sitting in the freezer. But the second goat, she has been making caldorera, which is a classic Filipino stew, goat stew. And whenever I talk to her on the phone now, she's just telling me how she's cooking with this goat. It's just the 2 of them now living with each other, and they're just eating. It sounds like they're just eating goat, learning how to cook goat. Their whole life is goat. My mom also has this idea that the goat is actually saving her from having high cholesterol, because it cares about her. I'm not sure what the logic is there. It's there. It makes sense when she talks about it.
Yeah.
There's one alive goat and 1 goat that they're eating, or how?
No, they're both dead now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's incredible. Anybody else have a similar story? Wow.
No.
I do not.
Actually, Nura has a pretty dark goat story, but I don't know if you want to share it.
Well, Nura, why don't you tell us how you grew up and what your, what food practices was like at your dinner table as a kid?
Sure. I grew up in a Somali family in London. And for my parents, and I think this is true for a lot of Somali parents, that they were really worried that when they came to England that we would suddenly lose all of our culture. And so for my family, it was really important for us to do Somali things. And, we had to go to Somali school on Sunday and learn Somali poems, and I know part of the anthem. But the one thing that makes me think about food and family the most is that my family are really religious. They're all Muslim, and it was during Ramadan that would be the time that would be the most community family feeling, but then the most food centric as well. So Ramadan, if you guys don't know it, is there's 1 whole month where you fast from sun up to sundown. So you don't eat a single thing before, sunset. and you have to wake up before sunrise to have something to eat, and then you fast all day, and then you break your fast together. And that breaking of the fast was really one of the most amazing, hilarious times, because it would be the entire day that you're spending cooking for that one meal. Mm-hmm. And it was the time that you invite, all your aunties and cousins would all come to the house, and everybody would be like sitting in the kitchen, cooking and gossiping. And then, we would all come together into the living room. Our living room was one of the biggest, so we would have all of our family over. And when you would walk in as a kid, like there was like the smells of the house, and you've been fasting all day long, so the smells smell extra amazing. And then you would come into this room full of aunties, and the first thing they would say is like, "Oh, you're getting boobs now." Like, no boundaries whatsoever. And then you would come in, everyone would joke and everyone would laugh, and then we would all like you'd be bussed around a bunch, do fetch stuff and do stuff, and then you'd come together and everyone would sit down and eat. It was just really nice. So I feel like for me, that's one of my strongest memories of food and family.
Yeah. I think about we're in the middle of the Lunar New Year celebration right now too, and I'm thinking, Nura, your story reminds me of like there's so many different dishes that have very significant or different significant like symbols in them. Mm. I loved when you were talking about how like your family was really wanting you guys to retain your Somali culture. Mm. I remember like my dad drilling home to us like, this is what this dish is for. This is what this dish is for. This is why we do this way,
and usually there's like sorry, David, there's usually like an idiom that is attached to
sure.
each symbol. Yeah, like the fish would have an idiom that's like nian nian you yi, which means like annual, plentiful, annual, abundant, blah blah. Or basically you'll have fish every year kind of thing. That's supposed to mean abundance. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, and even just having like if you're eating an animal like a chicken or a fish, everything's like whole too, to represent wholeness as well. I really love that. And I was thinking like of course we couldn't do anything because of COVID this year, but even just being able to drop off that type of, basically my family just did like a big drop off of food to each other. Another way of just, sharing food, right? Similarly to what we're thinking about now.
So Morgan asks, do any of you have planned meals to celebrate the end of quarantine whenever that happens?
Can I hot pot? Hello, like hot pot is the most hot pot is the most non-COVID friendly, non-COVID safe food. But that's probably the first thing I'll have is like a huge hot pot with tons of people where we're just sharing and sitting around a table.
Dim sum as well. I have visions of the giant lazy Susan in the middle of the table, filled to the brim with because dim sum items are actually really difficult to make, and you would never have that variety at home, so you have to go out for it, and I miss it so much.
Yeah.
Now, Amanda, is your family in Vancouver, or are they kind of spread throughout?
They're kind of spread throughout. My immediate family is in Vancouver and Kelowna, but I actually grew up in Southern Alberta. So actually we're south of even where Nura is, but Calgary Chinatown was my Chinatown growing up, but it was a 2-hour drive to get there.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah,
it's little like mycelial links.
And I imagine that there's not a lot of like Asian community, Chinese community specifically.
Alberta?
Yeah, in Alberta?
There's tons.
There's tons. Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm ignorant.
Well, there's more. I mean, I think there's more now than when I was growing up. It's still a predominantly white place, especially my hometown.
It's like barely, though. It's like 60-40 now.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Asians are taking over. I'm kidding.
Like all like non-BIPOC people.
Okay.
There's a ton of Somalians in Edmonton, so there's a huge Somali population that's happening over there. I mean, there's lots of West Africans, and it's becoming pretty mixed.
Nura, Annie, and Jen, I'm curious, what is the food for you guys post quarantine?
Oh,
I know what is mine for sure.
go for it.
Mine is always dinner parties. Like
Dinner parties, yeah.
Yeah. That is the way that I like to socialize the most. And to just like get a bunch of people together and feed them until they are ready to either fall asleep or explode. That's my
Yeah. You know it's a successful dinner party if you're all comfortable enough to just fall asleep in your friend's house.
Yeah.
That's how I know that I succeeded. Like I like give them enough cocktails and enough food to eat, and then they'll fall asleep one way or the other, you know.
Annie.
Okay, that's really hard. I don't know what the food is, but because I keep getting stuck on this idea that even though we're not sharing meals right now, which is huge and I really miss it, I've never had a time in my life where I've been sharing more recipes with other people. I think like, especially I'm just thinking about like over the holidays, it was like a constant stream of like, oh, how do you cook this? Like, what's the recipe for this? Like, remember that thing that you made at that dinner party? Can I have the recipe? So, I don't know. Maybe that's like a weird way that we're still sharing food with each other is through the recipes.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I don't know. I would eat anything as long as there's like, if I can eat at a table with like more than just my one person, I'm gonna be happy.
I have trepidations, and only in so much because of my social anxiety, and I feel like I would have to really ease back in, just because I live in this constant state of fear. I'm already like getting agoraphobic, so we'll see, because I think that it would be difficult to assume that I'll ever revert back to the BC is the before COVID is how I'm creating this timeline.
Right.
So yeah, before COVID, I think that version of me is now lost, and now there is the after COVID, the AC, which remains to be seen. But I am excited to share food. I think I would be very weirded out by sharing food, but I think that I would probably watch people eat food first, and then I will like dip my toe in, dip my hand in. It's very strange. I don't know. I'm being weirdly scared.
Yeah, I definitely feel that too, though. You know, that it's so, we've become so used to being fearful around being around, touching, interacting with other people, that I feel like there definitely will be an adjustment period where we are having to unlearn the things that we had to learn to survive. But I also feel like our natural tendencies might also take over, you know? And I can see myself like spooning things in people's bowls and
Well, we have 7 minutes left. What do we want to talk about in the last 6 minutes?
Yeah, do you guys have questions for each other, or even Jen and I?
I have one question for Amanda. Yes, because as we talk about, I don't know, we talk about food a lot, and I haven't personally figured out how to incorporate my love for food back into like my love for talking to people when we're not allowed to eat together. But Amanda's been doing, you've been doing international cooking class, international cooking party. It sounds so cool. It sounds like
yes.
So I wondered if you wanted to talk about the experience of doing that and how amazing it must be.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it started last, I guess when the world went into lockdown, because international cooking class is actually some of my girlfriends from grad school. So Julia, there's two Julias. One is with a J. Julia is in Colombia. She's in Medellin and sometimes in Bogota. And then the other Julia with a GIU is in London. Mariko is in Milan, and Slow is in Taipei. So we somehow found an hour that works for all of us, which is for me quite early in the morning. It's either 9 or 10 a.m. on a Saturday or Sunday. And we have taken turns facilitating. So somebody leads with a recipe and we all get the ingredients or whatever approximation we can get wherever we are. And then we just cook together on FaceTime and then document and eat what we've made. So we're on our 13th one. This Sunday, we're making some squash gnocchi led by Julia, the Italian. And it's been a lovely, lovely thing. And actually, I don't have it within arm's reach of me, but Slow, for kind of a Lunar New Year gift for us, actually put together a recipe book of the first 12 recipes that we've made together with all the pictures that we took, like screenshots of us on FaceTime. And it was it's been amazing to see them with regularity, because before it's always like, oh, let's catch up. But because we're all in lockdown, we check in every time and like, hey, how's it going in Colombia? How's COVID in Taipei? Of course, it's just not there in Taipei. Just checking in about our lives. So it's been really, really awesome. Thanks, Annie.
That's so dreamy. Yeah. That I feel like, because sometimes I think about this too, is that I feel like for me there's lots of terrible things about COVID, but one of the few shining lights is being able to reconnect with people that I still love. That it wasn't that I hate them, that I can't spend time with them, but that now it's almost like we have learned to prioritize our social networks in ways that we didn't have to before. I didn't have that same urgent need.
Totally. Like I remember, like, all of a sudden I'm doing regular Skype calls or Zoom calls with all these people that I don't normally speak to. Like even shameless plug for our next guest, my cousin Kai Cheng Tong. All of a sudden we're chatting every 2 weeks. Which was something that, Kai's in Toronto and I'm in Vancouver. We never thought about doing before, but, COVID seems to have sort of pushed me to think about, like, hey, what are the relationships that I want to make sure that I hold on to, despite not being able to be physically present with another person.
So. Yeah, I feel like maybe in times of crisis, we go back to what gives us comfort, to do a full circle to nourishment.
Yeah.
Nice one. I see what you did there.
Well, thank you guys so much. This was such an amazing conversation. Jen, should we say goodbye to our guests and then just give an intro to our next guest?
Sure. So thank you. This is my first time. 5 is a number I am unaccustomed to. So thanks for being patient with us as we figure out how to do this dinner table style. Thank you, Nura, Annie, and most of all, Amanda, for joining us in Hot Pot Talks. It was such a pleasure to talk to all three of you and for having such an incredible co-host. All right, so who do we have next? Because David's biggest flex, and I hear him say this flex every single time. David's biggest flex in his life is that his cousin is Kai Chen Tong, world-renowned, famous poet, activist. What else would you call Kai? Writer, author,
performer. She's now doing amazing, like, conflict resolution work as well. We're really excited to have her next week. Just a reminder, the next week it starts at 5:30 Pacific time, not 5 p.m. So 5:30 Pacific time. I also just wanted to mention, we keep forgetting to mention, I know that, live recordings, not everyone can watch them. All of our all of our Hot Pot Talks are recorded. They're viewable on the VALU Co-op and Love Intersections Facebook page, and also on the Love Intersections YouTube. They're all stored there. So if your friends couldn't watch tonight's episode, please refer them to one of those places to watch it.
And if you want further, or if you want instant notification, YouTube, subscribing to us on YouTube is the way to go. David and I are constantly frustrated by Facebook because I will not stop trashing it. So anyway, have a wonderful night, everybody.
Yeah, and just a quick reminder, we have Chinatown hot pot packs available for sale. They're little boxes of a single serving hot pot with ingredients that with the favorite ingredients of each of our panelists. And Jen and I will include like a little note about the genesis of Hot Pot Talks. They're going to be available. They're available for pre-sale right now. Jessica's going to drop the link into the chat. Yeah, they'll be available for pickup on the last week of March. For those who tuned in late, we have limited edition totes called Have You Eaten Today that are also available for sale right now. All proceeds go to our Engaging Chinatown project. There's the Have You Eaten beautiful tote bag designed by Shira Anisman, who's also a VALU Co-op member.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. So excited to see you guys next week.
Bye.
All right. Have a good night.